When you wake up, is your phone the first thing you reach for? Do you ever find yourself scrolling endlessly on social media despite promising yourself to cut back? Maybe you indulge in online shopping only to regret it when the bills come due. These habits may start innocently, but can slowly become chains that bind us, controlling us more than we control them. In our fast-paced, high-pressure world, many struggle with addictions and bad habits that seem impossible to break. Despite resolutions and self-help efforts, we often remain stuck in the same patterns, feeling powerless. But what if there's a different way to break free? What if connecting with a true source of freedom could unlock the chains holding you back? Today we're going to explore these questions as we continue our series on Encounters with Jesus. Thank you for joining me on More to Life.
In the quiet hum of the evening, the house was alive, but not with the sounds of fun or laughter. No, this house was alive with tasks. Dad, the workaholic, was deep in his zone, glued to his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard, his mind locked in on the latest email crisis, the latest deadline that had to be met. Meanwhile, Mom, with a weary smile, tucked the kids into bed. She had become the unofficial manager of the house, the one who juggled it all while Dad, well, he juggled spreadsheets. It wasn't that he didn't care. It wasn't that he didn't want to help. But every time he tried, his brain was already 3 steps ahead on work. The kids were tucked in, the house was quiet, and now, finally, he could do something for himself. He closed his laptop and sighed. Time to unwind. He sank into the couch and grabbed the controller for a video game. His family was in bed, and he had the space to just relax. Maybe just one game, he thought, the pixels of the screen flashing before his eyes. This was his time to recharge.
The Canadian Centre for Substance Use and Addiction reported in a study that substance use was responsible for 73,994 deaths in the year 2020, the equivalent of more than 200 lives lost each day. The struggle against addictions is a very real issue and is claiming more and more lives every year. But dealing with addictions and bad habits is nothing new. Throughout history, people have looked for ways to overcome the things that hold them captive. While the specifics may be changed, the core challenge remains the same. How do we find true freedom? There's a powerful story in the Bible about a man who was bound in ways more extreme than most of us can even imagine. His life was controlled by forces he couldn't overcome on his own. Yet in a single encounter with Jesus, everything changed. His transformation offers hope and incredible insights into how we too can break free from our own chains. Could it be that this story so long ago holds the key to overcoming our struggles with addiction and bad habits? Let's explore this encounter together and see how it can show us a path to true freedom.
It was late evening when Dad walked into the bedroom. He expected the usual, maybe a quick chat about the kids' day or a reminder of some to-do for tomorrow. But instead, he was met with a quiet, serious gaze from his wife, lying in bed. She held up the doctor's note. "I need total rest," she said. Total rest. What did that even mean? Dad froze, his mind racing. She'd been the one to juggle the house, the kids, the meals. She'd always been the one who seemed to handle everything, no sweat. And now she couldn't? He blinked, trying to process it. He had always been the worker, the provider, but this was new territory. His wife needed him to step up, but how? What did she mean by total rest? His first instinct was to dive into the work world and just keep going, but he knew, deep down, that it wasn't about that anymore. It was about family. It was about the kids. And as that realization sank in, Dad sighed. "All right, I've got this," he said. But even as he said it, the uncertainty lingered. Could he really do this?
The story begins in Mark chapter 5, verses 1 and 2 by setting the stage. It says, "They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. As Jesus steps onto the shore with his disciples, he's immediately confronted by a man tormented, it says, by an impure spirit. Today we would just simply say he was demon-possessed. This man comes out to meet them from the tombs, a place that represents confinement, darkness, death, and really a place of no return. Verses 3 to 5 gives us a clear picture of this man's condition by saying, "This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones." This is a pretty gruesome picture being painted here. This man is living among the dead and beyond the help of his community. Attempts to restrain him physically have failed. He broke the chains and shackles meant to control him. This behavior is evidence of a deep inner pain and just utter hopelessness. For some people, this is exactly how addictions and bad habits can feel sometimes. Like the man, they feel trapped in cycles of behavior that end up harming themselves, even though they want more than anything to just break free. Despite this man's condition, the next verse says that he ran to Jesus. And maybe it was because he was desperate, or maybe there was something about Jesus that drew him and gave him hope. Either way, it's a powerful image of someone reaching out for help. Verses 7 to 8 says, "He shouted at the top of his voice, 'What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me.' For Jesus had said to him, 'Come out of this man, you impure spirit.' Then Jesus asked him, 'What is your name?' 'My name is Legion,' he replied, 'for we are many.'" Notice how Jesus addresses the root of the problem instead of the symptoms. He speaks to the real issue, which was this impure spirit. The impure spirit recognizes Jesus and his authority and was afraid. And so it starts to bargain with him. This shows us clearly who's in charge in this situation. And it's interesting that the name the evil spirit used to identify itself was Legion. Now, what does that mean? Well, in Roman terms, a legion consisted of about 6,000 soldiers. So just when we thought this situation was bad enough, it gets worse. He's not only tormented by one evil spirit, but over 6,000 of them. There are many people who may have outward symptoms of a bad habit or an addiction, and that's what they're tempted to seek healing for. But the truth is that the addiction is merely a symptom, a coping mechanism to deal with unresolved hurt and trauma. If they don't deal with the underlying issue, they can drift from one bad habit to another or keep going through a cycle of the same addiction over and over again their entire lives. This can be devastating. It can be totally demoralizing. Dealing with addictions can be messy because they are evidence of a deeper pain. A few verses later, we arrive at the dramatic conclusion of this story. It says in verses 10 to 13, And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. This story is an example of the total restoration of a person who was in a completely hopeless situation. Later in verse 15, it says that people from the nearby town came out and saw this man sitting down, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. The transformation is astonishing. The onlookers had written this man off and believed there was no possible hope for him. But now there he was, calm and coherent. The people's fear perhaps stemmed from hearing Jesus have a conversation with a legion of demons and then defeat them using only his words, and then restore this man they all thought was beyond saving.
Dad was trying to prepare a meal, anything that didn't require too much thought. A slice of bread, some cold cuts, a bit of cheese. This was his version of cooking, and honestly, it didn't take much. The kids would eat it, right? They were easy like that. Why bother with something complicated? The kids didn't care. They grabbed the food eagerly, shoveling it into their mouths. Bread, cheese, done. They loved it. His mind wasn't really there. His hand moved on autopilot. His mind was on his work, on something that made him feel great. Another email, work, more work. The kind of work that made him forget about everything else. If I just get through today, I'll be back on track tomorrow.
You know, addictions can leave someone who's been battling them for years feel like they're living among the tombs as well, beyond hope. While they might not be living among literal tombs, addictions can create personal tombs, places of isolation, places of depression, places that can leave them feeling powerless to escape. Maybe you can identify with this man in some way. Maybe you've been wrestling with something for years and you're wondering, is there any hope for me? How can I break free from my chains and find lasting freedom? The answer is yes, there is hope. There's good news because there is more to life than just struggling with your addictions and feeling helpless in breaking free. I'd like to share with you just 3 simple and yet very profound steps that will change your life and give you hope starting today. I have a friend who shared these 3 steps with me who's had a history of a serious battle with an opioid addiction. His name is Richie Halverson, and he's written a book entitled Darkness Will Not Overcome. In this book, he offers hope to people wrestling with addictions by really just sharing his own story of recovery. How he went from losing everything he had, being in and out of jail, to experiencing full recovery. And today, he shares his story in halls and venues across the country with people who need hope and freedom as well. In his presentations, he says that the key to overcome any addiction is actually found in the first 3 steps of the 12-step Alcoholics Anonymous or AA program. They are focused on 3 vital things: humility, faith, and surrender. They are summarized by this phrase: I can't, he can, I think I'll let him. Let's unpack what this means, starting with the first one: I can't. The first step in recovery and freedom from the chains of addiction is to acknowledge the presence of those chains. Recognizing that you have a problem and cannot control your addiction is very important. The reality is that many people either don't realize they have a problem or they don't want to realize that they have a problem. And most of the time, they live with a sense of guilt and shame and end up hurting not just themselves, but the people they care about the most in their lives. You might be thinking, well, how do I know if I have a problem? Here are just 5 ways you can know if you have an addiction. See if you can answer yes to any one of these. Number 1, do you keep engaging in a bad habit even though you know it's hurting you and or the people around you? Number 2, do you think about that bad habit all the time and can't stop wanting it? Number 3, do you find yourself needing more and more of it to feel the same level of satisfaction and can't cut back? Number 4, do you surprise yourself at the lengths you go just to get a fix? And finally, number 5, do you become angry when you think people are on to you or confront you about your behavior? If you can answer yes to any one of these, chances are you have a problem. If you do, it takes humility to acknowledge to yourself that you have a problem and that you are powerless to change. But this is the first step in finding freedom. Once you can admit that you have a problem and you can't fix it, you move to the second step, which is realizing that he can. Attempts to bind the man in this story with chains and shackles represents our own efforts to control addictions on our own. We might rely on things like willpower and phone apps or use avoidance tactics. And while these strategies can be helpful, they often fail to address the underlying causes of our behavior. Overcoming deep-seated issues requires a change in perspective and approach. Most solutions might suppress the symptoms temporarily, but don't heal the internal wounds. But what if the issues you're facing aren't just physical in nature? What if the answer to your suffering needs a supernatural intervention, an encounter with a higher power, like this man in the story? C.S. Lewis, a renowned author and theologian, wrote, "Addictions are rooted in a spiritual thirst for the infinite, a desire for something beyond this world that only the infinite can satisfy." He suggests that finding freedom requires more than material or psychological solutions. Just like the man in the story, I too believe in order to find true freedom from your chains, you need to have an encounter with Jesus, because only He has the power to truly transform your life and give you that freedom that you desire most. It may not happen overnight. It may be a journey of healing, but I believe Jesus is the answer. Here are 3 ways Jesus can help. Number 1, Jesus offers you unconditional love and forgiveness. He can help you break free from the guilt and shame that often fuels addiction. His grace allows for a fresh start, which can empower you to move forward in recovery and hope. Number 2, a relationship with Jesus provides access to a strength greater than your own. Through prayer and faith, you can find the power to overcome the temptations and struggles that seem too big to handle alone. Number 3, Jesus gives a sense of purpose and identity beyond your addiction. You can embrace your identity as loved, as valued by God, and build a new life focused on positive choices, growth, and hope, replacing the void that addictions once filled.
After what felt like an endless cycle of small tasks, it was time for bed. He sighed, already thinking about the work waiting for him on his laptop. Just get them to bed, then you can get back to it, he told himself. This is what it's all about, he thought, but that quiet joy was short-lived. A few seconds later, the toddler was asleep, and Dad was out of the room, the silence settling in around him. The house was still, except for the faint hum of his thoughts nagging him about all the things left undone. So he started with the one thing that felt productive: vacuuming. Vacuuming wasn't a solution to his problems, but it kept him moving. If I just keep going, keep doing, maybe I'll feel like I've accomplished something, he reasoned. His body was tired, his mind more tired, but he pushed on. As the vacuum hummed over the floor, it felt like the only thing in his control. It was repetitive, mindless, and oddly soothing. But still, when it was done, nothing really felt different. Was this really what he was supposed to be doing?
So, number 1 was, I can't. Number 2 is, he can. And finally, number 3, I think I'll let him. Once you've had an encounter with Jesus, the ultimate chain breaker, continue to walk in faith. What does that mean? Well, you can open your heart to Him and tell Him what you're struggling with. Tell Him what your deepest desire is, and then believe that He will help you overcome. It's important to realize that sometimes His help comes through a local support group or a conversation with a professional trained to help people with similar addictions. Just trust that He will guide you. Just focus on letting Him change your life. Timothy Keller once said that Christianity is not about self-improvement. It's about transformation. Jesus doesn't just want to improve your life. He wants to transform it. He wants to change your heart. That's something you cannot do on your own. Only He can do that for you. But you have to surrender your heart and your life to Him. Remember, He can. The question is, will you let Him?
Dad's mind still buzzed with the tasks of the day. He had tried to manage everything, cleaning, cooking, staying connected to work. But there were moments when he realized this wasn't just about getting things done. So he sat at the piano, and with the kids gathered around, they began to play. The music was simple, a few notes here and there, but it was theirs. They laughed and sang along, and for the first time today, Dad felt a true sense of joy. He hadn't expected to feel this, the calm of a shared moment, the joy of being fully present with his children. The world outside the room could wait. The emails, the dishes, the laundry, they could wait. Right now, it was just about them, his kids, and the laughter that filled the room.
Reflecting on the experience of this man, here are just a few practical coaching questions that can help you on your journey this week. Number 1, what addictions or bad habits are currently holding you captive? Be honest with yourself about the areas where you feel powerless. Number 2, how effective have your own efforts been in trying to overcome these struggles? Recognizing the limitations of your own strength can help open us up to seeking help beyond ourselves. Number 3, are you willing to explore a spiritual solution by having an encounter with Jesus? Think about what that might look like to seek freedom through a relationship with Him. As a practical step, set aside 5 minutes each day this week for quiet reflection or prayer. Use this time to acknowledge your struggles and ask for strength beyond your own to overcome them. This small change can begin to shift your perspective and open the door to lasting transformation. Remember, you don't have to face this journey alone. And so if this presentation spoke to you today and you'd like to go deeper, I invite you to visit hopestudy.ca. There you will find an easy-to-use online study platform with several interactive guides on a variety of topics, or if you have questions, maybe you need support or simply need someone to talk to, reach out through More to Life social media channels. I'm here to walk alongside you on your journey.
By the time the evening rolled around, Dad had figured out how to balance a plate of food and bring it to his wife, who was still resting in bed. The feeling of accomplishment washed over him, not because he had made the perfect meal, but because he had tried. He wasn't perfect, but he was showing up. That night, the family gathered on the couch. Mom, Dad, the kids, all together. He didn't feel the weight of expectation. He just felt happy, surrounded by the family that had always been there.
Today we've explored the story of a man in chains who found freedom from the most hopeless situation through an encounter with Jesus. His transformation offers a powerful metaphor for our own struggles and addictions and bad habits. It shows us that true freedom is possible, and it's not through sheer willpower, but through connecting with a source greater than ourselves. In his book, Richie says, addiction thrives in helpless situations. But you know what? So does God. Remember, there's more to life than living in bondage. Embrace the freedom that Jesus offers from all that holds you captive. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with rocks everywhere you go. Over time, you become accustomed to the weight, but it drains your energy and limits your potential. Now imagine someone coming alongside you and offering to help you remove that backpack. Suddenly, you feel lighter, freer, and more capable than ever before. What if the chains of your addictions and bad habits could be lifted in the same way? What if the freedom you've been searching for is available, and all it takes is reaching out and accepting it? I'd like to take a moment to invite you to partner with Hope Channel Canada as an agent of hope. Here are 3 ways you can do that. Number 1, through your prayers. By praying for this ministry, you are partnering with us in asking God to use programs like this and many others on Hope Channel Canada to share the good news about Jesus with Canadians. Number 2, through your time. If you are able to volunteer, please see agentsofhope.ca for more information on how to do so and the areas where you can give of your time. And number 3, through your financial support. Your financial contribution helps Hope Channel Canada with ongoing production costs as we continue to provide valuable, life-changing programming across Canada. You can donate online by visiting agentsofhope.ca. And thank you for partnering with us and making Hope Channel Canada possible.